Afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. My name is Justine Yeo, SAS and Douglas class of 2014. And on behalf of the Rutgers Alumni Association, we're very excited to bring you to today the very first of our new series in the format of a lightning talk. So esteemed Rutgers alumni, I will devote the next 10 to 15 minutes on a topic that's geared towards career development for any age, but especially relevant to the newly graduating or the graduated. And there's also going to be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. These talks are designed to be easily digestible, hence the duration format. And we will be recording these sessions to be made available on our LinkedIn page afterward. A quick bit of housekeeping here is that you'll see at the top of your Zoom screen that we have both the chat and the QA functions enabled. The chat function on the left is for any tech or connectivity issues you may be experiencing. Here you can let us know if our microphones or screens cut out. The Q&A to the right-hand side is more for questions that you may have. Pop them into this section and we can address them once the lightning talk is over. A gentle reminder again is that since the session is being recorded, all questions and comments will also be captured in the final recording. So we kick off today with our topic being an introduction to networking, brought to you by Jim Kelly, who is a 30-year veteran of the consumer healthcare industry. Jim's experience includes serving as Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer at Prestige Consumer Health, President of Comb Inc., and CEO of Vermont's Original Skincare. Jim is the founder and president of Business Vision Consulting, a boutique business development group, and recently became the president and chief operating officer of Harm Reduction Therapeutics, which is the only not-for-profit over-the-counter pharmaceutical company focused on launching the Revive brand of naloxone for treatment and reversal of opioid overdose. Jim is also a proud alumnus of Rutgers College and the Business School, and actively serves the RAA as the leader of the long-range planning and nominations committees. Jim, do you want to get started?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Justine, for the introduction. I appreciate that. As Justine said, I have about 10 or 15 minutes to speak to you about what I've learned over my career in the whole networking world, in a way that will help you build a robust and lasting network for your career. We will have ample time, as Justine mentioned, for questions and answers a little bit later. So why don't we jump in? So, it's often said that about 80% of jobs that are found are through networking. And so I guess the way to start this is to say, what is networking? If that's how many jobs are found through networking, what is it? All right, well, networking, as I define it, is cultivating and maintaining productive and mutually beneficial business relationships. So let's sort of break that down a little bit. So the key ideas here: cultivate and maintain requires focusing on the right people and working creatively to maintain those contacts. Productive means it leads to positive actions and outcomes. Mutually beneficial says that networking requires a give and take from both parties. It's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. And relationships means building genuine, ongoing sharing of ideas, resources, and contacts to help one another. So I've developed what I call the 7 key steps to building your network. And the first step is setting networking goals and developing a plan of attack. So this is really sort of the 7 steps of how you go about building this network. So I would say ask yourself some of these questions as you start your establishing goals and developing this plan. And be honest about your assessment of all of these. So what industry are you interested in being in? What kind of work do you really like to do? What are the activities that you engage in that really excite you? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And it's important that this be painfully honest. And it's important you can even, ask your people who are close to you, family members and friends, to also assess your strengths and weaknesses. This is sort of an honest assessment of what you do well and what maybe you don't do so well. assess the idea of how important and the organizational purpose and culture you want to be in. I can tell you throughout my career that the culture that you join is one of the most critical things in your success in that organization. So assessing it up front and really deeply is important, and critically important to your long-term success. And then lastly, what do you hope to achieve by networking? What is your ultimate goal here? So step two, develop a network inventory. So this is sort of once you've done the soul searching that I suggest in step number one, and you develop good answers, the next step is develop a network inventory. So there's sort of three classes of contacts as I think about them. There's cold contacts. These are people you don't know. You might find them on LinkedIn. They might be in the alumni directory. You might find names in industry journals, people who are saying interesting things that you want to learn about and you want to connect with them. And then there's warm contacts, and these are where you meet people in mutual interest groups, whether they be clubs on campus, career fairs, campus organizations and affiliations. And then there's what I call hot contacts. And these are friends, friends of friends, family, colleagues, classmates, fraternity brothers, sorority sisters, professional contacts of anyone that you know well. So really think hard about who are the people that I can reach out to based on a knowledge about them or a connection, direct connection to them. The next step number three, is develop a personal brand story. So this is where you take that assessment in step number one. You now have a group of people you want to talk to. Now you have to develop, what is it that I want to say about myself to them? So here's a series of questions you might want to ask yourself. What makes you unique? What are your interests that are intense? And an emphasis on intense here. What do you really feel very excited about? What do you do well? What are you really passionate about? That's a critical thing to be thinking about. How can you be helpful to others? What are things that you have, strengths that you have, or contexts you have that can be helpful to others? And then ultimately, this sort of feeds into an elevator pitch. So, and what that basically is this is who I am, and answer the question, this is who I am. And um, these are the kind of problems that I want to solve, and the kind of work that I want to do. And so I'm encouraging you to think about, as you think about networking, think about things you want to do, think about them in terms of problems that you want to attack, and think about them in terms of the kind of work that you want to do. Don't always think of them in terms of a job that I want. And I'll explain this a little bit later on. So the next step. Now you're ready to reach out to your contacts. So it's important to remember that email is the medium of communication for most businesses. It's not text. It's that's for when you have a close, more personal relationship with someone. But in business, email is really the medium for most business communication. Um, in this one mode of reaching out to contacts is to set up informational interviews. Um, and I think the way to think about those is that these are exploratory discussions. This is not about a job. This is about exploring what the job content is with someone you might be speaking with. You have to be clear about your intentions and have prepared questions to ask when you go into these informational interviews. So, importantly, these are discussions with people in an industry you might be interested in a job function or job role you might be interested um, in a with someone who's solving problems that you want to solve. So you're looking for information from them so you can assess what it is exactly that you want to do within that industry. You're not looking for a job. And I think it's important to note the difference here. When you come across as wanting a job, that tends to sound desperate. You want to find out, what people do, how they do it, how their industry works. So this is more about exploring industries exploring jobs and functions within jobs and job content than it is about a job itself. You can meet for coffee, you can meet for lunch, you can do Zoom conversations. They don't have to be long and drawn out, or you can do in office meetings. Any one of these can really work to make that exploratory discussion happen. And these are two-way discussions about how you might help one another. It's important to know in networking that this is a give and take, that when you meet with someone, you should be bringing three ideas about how you may be able to help them to that conversation. So understand you're going to be asking them to give you information so that you can learn, but you also want to be offering them something so that there's this two-way street dynamic in it. If you're viewed by the other party as someone who can bring value to them, that's where contact really germinates. And when you're in a conversation like this, at the very end, always ask for other contacts that this person you're meeting with can recommend that who you should meet. So, and I would say look for three contacts out of every meeting, and say to whoever you're talking to, it's a great discussion. I really appreciate all your insights. Are there other people I should be talking to who you would recommend? Okay, so after you've done a whole group of these informational interviews, you want to step back and you want to sort of assess what you've learned and how it's gone, and be honest about what you've learned and what you did well, you think, or what you didn't do so well. It's important, though, in this follow-up that you send a thank you email within 24 hours. It's really important. That means that you're responsive to people. That means that they can count on you as a network partner. So you want to always give that signal of being upfront, being prompt, and responding to people's needs. You also want to include a specific, something specific about the conversation you had. That ties back to the idea that you are really listening to what they said. The reinforcement of that is important for the other person. You can send an article that you've read recently that's relevant to your conversation. If you're well read, and hopefully most of you are, you're always going to come across an article. At least I found this, that's relevant to a conversation they might have had in the last day or two. And I'll often send just a quick email to that person with with a link attached or something like that, just to say, hey, had a great conversation. Thought you might find this interesting. You want to reaffirm any follow-up commitments that you made in those conversations. You want to reflect on what you learned and what you still need to learn. So you're going to come away with those from these conversations as learning a lot, but they also create more questions that you might have. So you want to do a full assessment of that. And you want to think about ways you can help the other person and offer to act on their behalf. If you think there's a way you can help, offer that and see if you can help them out. Again, this follows up on the two-way street dynamic that I think networking really is all about. Step 6, maintain contact. I think this is real critical too. I'm not talking about badgering people every week for the next 10 months. Every few months after your conversation, it's always nice to give an update to that person about your progress. Hopefully they'll be interested to hear how you're doing, or you might have an additional question. You might have an article to send to them. I think keeping that dialogue going via that kind of activity is important to do. You want to offer your contacts to assist in the project they might be working on. As you engage, you'll learn more about that person. They might be doing something where the light bulb goes off for you, or someone who can help them, and you make that contact for them. And then, finally, you can invite them to a webinar or a presentation of interest that they can access online. I think that's also a really nice thing to do. And whether they attend it or not is not the point. It's that you have offered that to them. You're bringing value to them. I think that's important. And then lastly, step number 7, it's update your networking plan regularly and stay focused. Don't lose interest. I think and this sometimes takes some hard work because everyone has a lot going on, but try not to lose interest, right? Keep a close and ongoing record of your contacts with every person. Build your contact base with other people who your contacts have recommended you meet. And if someone says, hey, here's 3 people you ought to talk to, or 1 person you ought to talk to, You really need to follow through on that. Don't let that die. Make that contact. Give them an opportunity to tip that person off that you're going to be calling them, um, but make that contact. Don't let it die. Um, then you want to prioritize and focus your contact list on the most productive people based on the career path you decide to pursue. You will meet people in this networking process as you build it out who are not going to be, you're going to find are not going to be valuable or not as responsive to you as it relates to, creating a longer term relationship. And so it's okay not to follow up with those people who clearly are giving you signals that they don't want to engage any further. But find the ones who are really interested in continuing to engage and really nurture those over time. You can expand your focus contact list to others, who have relevant experience in your field. And importantly, you can use LinkedIn to build and expand your contacts on an ongoing basis. I would encourage everyone at this point, if you're not on the RAA LinkedIn, if you're not linked in there, we have over 400 members. We need more on the RAA page. Please link up with us. And I think the people who are already there are showing their willingness to engage. I'd also add that the RUAA, which is the university-wide, not just the New Brunswick campuses, they have over 40,000 members. So take advantage of that. Join those and use those as databases of people you can reach out to. So I'm going to conclude my talk with something that I've learned over my career, aside from what the things I've offered already. Um, and I mentioned this earlier in the conversation that this is not about finding a job. This is about finding work, basically. So there's a finite number of jobs um, but there's always work, plenty of work to do. So pursuing networking as an exercise and looking for work that aligns with your passion, if you're doing that, you just might identify a job that you love through that process. So, but it shouldn't be job directed. It should be more about learning, more about work that you love to do, more about solving problems, um, not specifically job related. And you'll find your way there. Believe me, I've been through this many times in my career, and most of the jobs I've ended up with, I've never even looked for. They sort of came my way as a result of the networking that I've done. So I'll close with that and say thank you to everyone for listening, and hope you found it interesting. And I think we can move to questions and answers.
Thanks, Jim. As promised, this is always going to be very short and sweet. And we now get to the Q&A section. I think everyone's still maybe thinking about what to ask. So I actually have one or two questions of my own, if that's okay. I guess my first question is, I can imagine that especially in this post-COVID kind of world, it's pretty daunting to approach strangers. When you talked about the cold contacts, even in safe environments such as, if you go to like a networking event or mixer. So do you have any advice on, those who maybe have anxiety on networking or just, are just a little bit on the shyer side?
Yeah, it's a very good question. These are not necessarily natural environments or always very natural things for a lot of people. Even a networking meeting is not all that natural, but understand that if you're going to a networking meeting, if that's what it's called, or a meeting where you're with a group of people, um, whether it might even be an industry association meeting or something like that, you need to understand that everyone there is looking for contacts. Everyone there is looking to build their business. Um, and so you should know going in that, and you should feel comfortable going in that everyone understands the ground rules. So approaching someone and introducing yourself and saying, no, this is sort of who I am, and these are the problems I want to solve, or the kinds of things I want to get involved with. People are expecting that. So you shouldn't have anxiety about that going into a meeting like that. And you shouldn't even have anxiety about reaching out to someone simply for an exploratory kind of a conversation, like I've said with the informational interviews. Um, Easier said than done for a lot of people, I understand, but also understand that most people are very willing to share. They want to share their experiences. People like to talk about things that they've done and and experiences they've had. So if you enter that conversation by introducing yourself, telling them the kinds of things that you like to do or are interested in learning about, and asking them a question or two about themselves, like how did you get to where you are in your career? How did you get started doing that? It's a very sort of innocuous question. It's a not a threatening question. It opens the door for them to speak about themselves, which most people are quite happy to do.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you've got any questions, it's just at the very top for the Q&A section. But selfishly, I also have another question. A key point that you've made is the consistency of contact. It's not a kind of one and done deal. You email someone, they respond to you, and you get a job, right? This is more about like a long-lasting relationship, hopefully. So what's your take on those who might feel like they have no updates or nothing to contribute? Because I imagine that those who are new graduates, or maybe those who are kind of in a career rut, they might not have too much to share.
Yeah, I think that's where, during my presentation, I spoke a lot about, inviting people to a webinar or finding an article that might be of interest to that person. I think those are the kinds of things that if you're struggling for, well, what do I say to this person or how do I keep the contact going? Those kinds of things I think are relatively easy to find and easy to to send to someone via an email. So I would encourage you to I don't think you should be badgering people, but I think those who seem receptive to your outreach, um, think think hard about what they've said to you and try to evaluate what they like and what they're interested in, and find things that they might be interested in that you can send them. To me, and I've done this many times throughout my career, where there's a person who I met, on a business trip or something like that, and I was trying to figure out, well, how do I take the next step with, trying to learn more from them. It was something as simple as that. Find an article that they would be interested in, or direct them to, a webinar or something that they might find of interest. And like I said, whether or not they respond immediately is not the point. The point here is that they see that you're earnestly trying to be a resource to them, and people really value that. I know I do in my career. When someone shows me that they can be a resource to me, and that I feel like I can help them, I will continue to engage with those people, because there's a mutually beneficial reason for that, right? So, and as I said at the very early part of my presentation on networking, mutually beneficial relationships are really what it's all about. And so, there's got to be something in it for you. There's got to be something in it for them. So, that's I think is the best way to to try to bring value to people.
Amazing, thank you. We've got a couple of questions coming through in the chat, so I'll just start with the first one. If you're interested in learning about industries or job functions in a foreign country you don't currently live in, how do you recommend approaching that?
Okay, well, the one thing I would say is, so let's say you're interested in Germany and you want to live there and you want to, you want to work in Germany. There are a lot of a lot of industry associations in Germany that you can find online that allow you to start to understand and, who the key players are and those kinds of things. So I think that's one way of going about beginning to create a network in another country. Justine, people on the call here might not know, but Justine is a Rutgers graduate. As she said, she lives in New Zealand. You might even have something to add there, Justine, in terms of what you've done living in another country.
A little bit, yeah, I can give my 2 cents on this.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot, though. Sorry.
No, not at all. This is highly relevant to me, obviously, because I did start my career in the USA in New York, but I ended up furthering my career here in New Zealand, where I'm currently broadcasting from. And so all the points that you made about social media and kind of that sort of virtual networking, that was incredibly relevant to me. I did find using LinkedIn as my primary source of networking to be incredible. I narrowed it down based on field, based on people who might have had similar academic interests as I did, as well as similar career trajectories as me. And it was just a matter of taking it from there, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, but then trying to foster those real life relationships. That's also pretty important, in this post-pandemic world too. Like you said, It was all about a matter of follow-up too, making sure that every time I met up with these people or had some sort of contact with them, it was always to add value to their lives, be it professional or personal. Great question. We have another question, which is, would you say that there's a tipping point for the size of your professional network beyond which you can't maintain relationships with so many people? Is there a guideline number? Because, they assume that there's no value in connecting to 1,000 strangers on LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah, it's a very good question. I would tell you that my professional network after 30 years is probably about 25 or 30 key people. Um, so it doesn't have to be huge. And, some of those people, I would say probably a third of those people I might contact once a year. Others I see regularly at industry conferences and things along those lines. And when I don't see them there, I'll usually, ping them with a message, an article or something like that along the way. So you're not looking for 1,000 people here. You're looking for a fairly small number of people who you can rely on. And as you know, when you get into a particular job or you're working in a particular field, um, the closeness of your network will emanate to a great extent from who you work with, because you learn about those people, you learn about their skill sets, you learn that you can trust them. So, but over a 30-year career, I would say, if you get if you have one really strong contact a year, almost, that's probably a good thing. But you have to start somewhere, and so the steps that I've outlined, really get you going down that path. And as you get into different jobs or working in different industries, you'll meet a lot of people, and you'll talk to a lot of people. And if you keep the principles that I've put together here top of mind and use them, your network will evolve, and you'll have a small number of people you can trust, and you can reach out to at any time. And once you establish that, it can go 3 or 4 years before you contact someone. And when you contact them, they're usually right there saying, "Yeah, how can I help you?" Because you've developed a relationship over years. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. Hopefully that answers their question. I guess another one of my questions, not to monopolize your time, is more of a personal question. So over the course of your career, how valuable have you found either your cold or your warm contacts versus, the other category? Because I've been reading a lot of articles lately that talk about the fact that surprisingly enough, most valuable networking comes from your cold contacts, which you might not have, daily or weekly or even monthly access to these people. But just, once a year when you check in, all of a sudden they turn around something really valuable. So what's your take on that?
I mean, I think you have to keep all three of those levels alive and well. So there's a number of people who I connect with regularly on LinkedIn, um, who I've worked with in the past, but we live in distant states, and we still keep in contact via LinkedIn, or I'm sending them emails every once in a while. I also schedule calls, just catch up calls, just to say hello. And I these are people I know, and they know me, and we might not talk regularly, but so I do a fair amount of that as well, with a small group, maybe about 10 people, all who are well connected in their areas. And we just kind of keep things going. So I guess my best answer is, I think you want to keep all three levels alive. Um, and I've always said, you just never know what opportunity might present itself from any one of those groups, whether it be a close family member or a friend of a family member, whether it be someone you've worked with before, or whether it be someone you largely have contact with on via LinkedIn. Um, I can tell you honestly, I've gotten uh, two two of the roles that Justine talked about, the CEO role and my more recent role here as president of harm reduction, through connections on LinkedIn. So and the previous ones came from family friends. So but I think every assignment I've ever gotten has been through some networking contact. I can't recall formally, working with a recruiter as an example in my industry. I don't think I ever got a job through a recruiter. So, I know it's different for everybody, and there's some people who will profess that recruiters are great, and that's how they get all their jobs. But to me, that's about looking for a job. I've never looked for a job. I've always looked for to solve problems. I've always looked to engage with people I find interesting, and and things sort of happen when you're known as a resource to other people. You just don't know when it's going to happen, or or what prompted that. Hopefully that answers your question, Justine.
Absolutely. Thank you for your wisdom. So to honor everybody's time, we are going to close out. Thank you again for your participation. Jim has, yep, so we invite you to stay connected with us at the Alumni Association. If you're watching this on your laptop, just take out your phone right now and use that QR code that's on the screen there. We have a ton of different events coming up, and that QR code, if you want to access this PowerPoint presentation later, we'll also have a list of, or rather this QR code will have a list of almost everything RA related, be it events, other webinars, other seminars for your use. We also encourage you to check us out on LinkedIn, as Jim mentioned. It's a pretty small and agile group, which means that whatever questions you do have, you'll probably have a better chance of having it answered. So this webinar has been recorded, and it will be made available on our LinkedIn page, hopefully sooner rather than later. And we appreciate everyone's time again, and hope that you have a great day.
One last thing I'd add, Justine. I guess we're done.
You're still live.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, we're still,
Well,
I just stopped sharing my screen.
I'm sorry. Yeah, one last thing I was going to add is that look me up on LinkedIn if you want. If anyone wants to follow up and have a conversation with me offline, I'm under Jim Kelly, Small Company Growth Quarterback, and you can find me there and send me a note, and I'll be happy to set up some time to talk if you'd like.
Amazing. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.